February 20, 1945, northern sector of Iwo Jima, Japanese troops observed a peculiar sight as American tanks advanced through the volcanic ash. Dark smoke emanated from these vehicles, but it wasn't due to damage. It seemed to serve another purpose. The turret on one tank swiveled toward a concrete bunker, revealing an altered barrel that resembled a nozzle rather than a cannon. Soon after, there was a mechanical hiss reminiscent of compressed air escaping. In the following moment, a stream of burning fuel erupted over 150 yards of volcanic ash, engulfing nearby fortifications in a fiery torrent of napalm. The agonized cries were brief but unforgettable. These tanks were equipped with flamethrowers, a weapon unfamiliar to the Japanese defenders. This innovation would alter the course of combat during one of the Pacific War's most grueling battles. Yamada was unaware that these vehicles represented months of clandestine development at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. The Navy's CBS unit worked tirelessly around the clock on top secret modifications. Their efforts combined American industrial prowess with battlefield requirements, resulting in what a Marine battalion commander would later deem the best single weapon for the operation. The Battle of Iwo Jima was entering its second day, and the dynamics of destruction were about to shift dramatically. These 8 tanks accounted for over 30% of Japanese casualties through incineration, a figure that would leave a lasting impression on survivors from both sides for decades to come. For nearly an entire year, the Imperial Japanese Army had transformed Iwo Jima into one of the Pacific's most formidable defensive positions. An area spanning 8 square miles was turned into a fortress that defied conventional military strategy. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, tasked with commanding the island's defense in June 1944, recognized from the outset that he could not defeat the American forces. His mission had a different objective altogether. Kuribayashi aimed to make capturing Iwo Jima so expensive in terms of resources and lives that the United States would think twice before invading Japan's homeland. He had carefully analyzed the mistakes made during battles at Saipan, Peleliu, and the Philippines, where conventional Japanese defense strategies, such as meeting enemy forces on open ground and launching suicidal banzai charges, had resulted in devastating losses due to overwhelming American firepower. Recognizing the need for a radical shift from traditional samurai methods, Kuribayashi opted for an unconventional approach. Rather than engaging in glorious but futile frontal assaults, his 21,000-strong force would adopt guerrilla tactics from within an extensive network of underground fortifications, transforming Iwo Jima into a subterranean battlefield. By February 1945, Japanese engineers had constructed approximately 11 miles of interconnected tunnels with plans to extend this network to cover a total of 17 miles. The completed portions were dug as deep as 7 stories beneath the volcanic rock, creating an intricate system that included over 5,000 caves and underground chambers capable of housing up to 300 to 400 men each. The island's surface was also fortified with 500 meticulously positioned strongholds featuring reinforced concrete bunkers with walls 4 feet thick. These structures, bolstered by steel rods salvaged from abandoned projects, were strategically placed on key elevations and covered every potential vantage point for interlocking fields of fire. Japanese guns hidden behind steel blast doors could be quickly exposed to fire and then resealed after each shot. The tunnel system itself was a marvel of engineering ingenuity. Ventilation shafts disguised as natural rock formations ensured air circulation, while underground hospitals equipped with operating theaters were capable of treating up to 400 wounded soldiers. Communication centers buried deep at 75 feet below ground coordinated defensive operations through extensive telephone networks. Storage facilities held supplies sufficient for a 2-month siege. One particularly impressive structure under Hill 382 housed a chamber measuring 50 meters in length and 20 meters in width, large enough to accommodate an entire battalion. Kuribayashi deployed his forces with meticulous precision, designating the southern sector around Mount Suribachi as a semi-autonomous command under Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi, who commanded 2,000 men responsible for artillery positions targeting landing beaches. the majority of Japanese troops, 15,000 strong, were concentrated on the northern plateau, which offered optimal defensive terrain. This area was directly supervised by Kuribayashi himself, ensuring that his forces were poised to inflict heavy casualties and exact a steep price for any American invasion attempt. Between these key positions, a central reserve force of 4,000 troops was poised to provide reinforcements via the extensive tunnel network if any area came under threat. The Americans were aware that Iwo would pose significant challenges due to its well-prepared defenses, although aerial reconnaissance had not uncovered the full extent of Kuribayashi's underground fortifications. Over a period of 74 days, bombers dropped an estimated 600-800 tons of explosives on the island, while naval artillery fired some 22,000 shells at Japanese positions. American strategists anticipated that this bombardment would considerably weaken enemy resistance and predicted that the island would be captured within 5 days. However, their expectations were severely misplaced. The preliminary attacks had only destroyed approximately 200 out of the 500 fortified positions. The tunnel network remained largely undamaged, with most Japanese soldiers untouched by the intense bombardment. 5 months before the invasion at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, Colonel George F. Unmarked gathered a team that would play a pivotal role in advancing armored warfare in the Pacific. As an experienced Army officer with 44 years of military service, he led the U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service's most secretive project in the Central Pacific region, known as CNPAC. His mission was to develop a weapon system capable of neutralizing Japanese cave and bunker complexes that had proven impervious to conventional weaponry. Unmarked's initial team consisted solely of the 43rd Chemical Laboratory Company, but he quickly realized that the task at hand required extraordinary expertise. He recruited an additional 25 personnel from the 117th Naval Construction Battalion, renowned for their mechanical ingenuity and practical engineering skills across the Pacific. He also integrated members from both the 5th Marine Tank Battalion and the 81st Ordnance Company, forming a highly specialized joint service team dedicated to creating a weapon capable of driving Japanese forces out of their underground sanctuaries. At the forefront of technical advancements were machinist-mate first-class Arai Kern and electricians-mate second-class Joseph Kell. Their names might never grace headlines, but their innovations would save countless American lives on the battlefield. Drawing upon previous combat experiences from various island campaigns, these individuals had witnessed Marines succumb to attacks while assaulting fortified positions that artillery alone could not dismantle. They recognized that the issue was not a lack of firepower, but rather an inability to apply it efficiently against enemies entrenched underground. The challenge they faced was formidable. Early efforts to equip tanks with flamethrowers yielded inconsistent results. The Army's initial attempts were makeshift modifications, essentially attaching portable flamethrowers directly onto tank hulls. Although the Canadian Ronson system, which the Marines had procured 30 units of, offered a range of 60 to 80 yards using thickened fuel, it provided only 30 to 40 seconds of flame and was plagued by maintenance issues leading to high failure rates. Over 4% in combat conditions. The breakthrough came with the conversion of M3 light tanks into what became known as Satan tanks. The first prototype created by the 43rd Chemical Company, dubbed Hells of Fire, showcased promise but also exposed significant limitations. Limited turret rotation SN-A2 and restricted flame gun elevation angles. Additionally, the thin armor of the light tank made it vulnerable to Japanese 47 anti-tank guns commonly used in defensive fortifications. Unmarked's team knew they needed a superior solution. Through official military channels reaching to top-level command, Unmarked reported directly to Admiral Chester Nimitz's staff. 8 M4A3 Sherman medium tanks were identified for conversion. These vehicles weighed 35 tons, powered by a 500 horsepower Ford GAV engine and armored with plates ranging from 25 to 76 mm thick. Their standard armament included a 75mm main gun along with several 30 caliber machine guns. The Shermans had demonstrated remarkable resilience on European battlefields, offering the necessary armor protection against Japanese anti-tank weapons. However, securing these tanks was just the start of the project. Raicher and Kell's groundbreaking approach involved merging the most advantageous features from three distinct flamethrower systems, the British Ronson, the Navy Mark I, and captured German designs used in North Africa. Under harsh Hawaiian conditions, CBS personnel worked tirelessly for 20 days, often sleeping in shifts beside their welding equipment. This intense effort led to the creation of an unprecedented weapon system known as CBH-1 Construction Battalion Hawaii Model Len. The innovative CBH-1 flamethrower represented a significant advancement over previous designs. Its installation demanded 150 pounds of welding rod and 100 electrical connections, each crucial for proper functioning. Each conversion required 200 man-hours and featured 150 specially machined parts crafted by CB metalworkers. The cost ranged between $20,000 and $25,000 per tank, which equates to approximately $360,000 in today's currency. The technical specifications of the CBH-1 were revolutionary. It operated at a pressure of 300 pounds per square inch, 3 times that of earlier models, and boasted a maximum range of 150 yards when using thickened fuel, nearly triple the distance achievable with portable flamethrowers. The fuel mixture, a precise blend developed by the 43rd Chemical Laboratory combining diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm thickener, burned at an astounding 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Additionally, it could sustain continuous flame for up to 80 seconds, though doctrine advised bursts of 2 to 3 seconds to conserve fuel and maintain accuracy. Crucially, the flamethrower replaced the tank's main gun, enabling a full traverse of 270 degrees and elevation from 10 to 35 degrees through the existing fire control systems. This integration allowed the gunner to aim the flame weapon as accurately as a conventional cannon using the same periscope and controls, requiring minimal additional training for crew members. Perhaps most significantly, this psychological impact on enemy forces was unmatched by any other weaponry of its time. The CBS applied standard Marine Corps olive drab paint to the modified tanks, leaving no distinctive markings that might hint at their sinister purpose. To Japanese observers, these vehicles appeared indistinguishable from regular Sherman tanks until they unleashed their devastating firepower. By then, it was already too late. The fuel system was an engineering marvel. Each tank contained 290 gallons of thickened fuel in the main tanks and an additional 10 gallons of unthickened fuel for ignition purposes. A separate pressurized nitrogen tank prevented combustion if hit by enemy fire, as nitrogen does not support burning. Multiple safety features were incorporated into the design to avoid the catastrophic explosions that had plagued earlier flamethrower vehicles. Below Hill 382, General Kuribayashi meticulously positioned his defenses based on precise mathematical calculations. Kill zones overlapped at strategic angles, and artillery spotters concealed in spider holes could swiftly direct fire onto any grid coordinate. Machine gun nests were arranged to create overlapping fields of fire that would funnel American forces into pre-registered artillery targets. General Kuribayashi's defensive strategy was deceptively simple: conserve ammunition, remain underground, and force the Americans to attack them. His orders to every commander were unequivocal: do not die until you have killed 10 Americans. No large-scale counterattacks would be authorized, and soldiers were instructed to hold their positions until overwhelmed by enemy forces before resorting to grenades, bayonets, and finally hand-to-hand combat. Basic calculations indicated that with 21,000 defenders, they could cause up to 200,000 casualties, which far exceeded the total number of American troops involved in the invasion. Japanese defensive strategies had evolved significantly since their early engagements in the Pacific theater. Reports from Saipan and Pelileo highlighted the vulnerability of flamethrower operators. The black smoke emitted by burning diesel fuel made these soldiers easy targets. Due to the limited range of the weapon, flamethrowers had to move closer to enemy positions, exposing themselves to gunfire. In earlier battles, Losses among portable flamethrower units were extremely high, with casualty rates surpassing 70% and some formations suffering as much as a 92% loss. Training focused heavily on counter-flamethrower tactics, instructing machine gunners to target soldiers carrying the distinctive twin fuel tanks of these weapons. Snipers were given additional ammunition specifically for picking off flame operators, while infantry units practiced assaulting flamethrower positions with bayonets at close range, exploiting the weapon's minimum effective distance where it could not be aimed downward. However, Japanese defensive planning assumed that all flamethrowers would be carried by foot soldiers. The idea of armored flamethrower vehicles, such as tanks equipped to approach enemy fortifications under armor cover and deliver precise incendiary attacks at extended ranges, had never been contemplated. Defensive structures designed to withstand artillery and aerial bombardment lacked measures to protect against petroleum-based fires that could penetrate apertures and ventilation shafts. This oversight would prove disastrous. Fortifications that were Japan's greatest asset became death traps when faced with weapons capable of turning solid defenses into crematoria. 8 M4A3 flamethrower tanks landed on Iwo beaches on February 19th D-Day alongside regular Sherman tanks from the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions. The official Marine Corps designation for these vehicles was M4A3R5, though various documents referred to them using different nomenclature such as POA, CQS H1 and CB-MK1. They arrived on the beach in the 5th wave around 10:300 am after initial landings had secured a foothold. Navy orders instructed these specialized tanks to remain in reserve during the opening phase of the assault, with Marine commanders waiting to evaluate the tactical situation before deploying them. The tanks were deployed with precision. 4 went to the 4th Marine Division and 4 to the 5th. Each tank received an identification number ranging from 431 to 438. Some crews adorned their vehicles with nicknames like Hellfire, Corkscrew, and Blaze of Glory, while others remained unmarked, concealing their ominous purpose until needed in battle. For the initial 24 hours, these flamethrower tanks stayed idle near the beach as hundreds of Marines perished attempting to advance against unseen Japanese positions. The volcanic ash, rising above a man's calf with each step, made infantry movement extremely arduous. Traditional tactics were proving disastrous. Naval gunfire failed to breach bunkers embedded in 10 feet of volcanic rock and concrete. Artillery shells detonated pointlessly against fortifications designed to withstand direct hits from 16-inch naval guns. Marine riflemen encountered defenses that seemed as solid as mountains. By day's end, casualties numbered 420 Marines killed or wounded. The beach had turned into a death trap due to Japanese artillery fire on the concentrated landing forces. Sherman tanks struggling to move inland got stuck in the ash or were obliterated by concealed anti-tank guns. By dusk, the invasion force had advanced less than 700 yards from the beach, falling far short of D-Day objectives aimed at securing the first airfield. On February 21st, D-51, the situation was dire. The 21st Marine Regiment faced an impasse while trying to cross Motoyama Airfield No. 1 with 3 concrete pillboxes controlling the approach, their overlapping machine gun fire creating a killing zone 200 yards wide. By the time 2 rifle companies had been severely depleted from frontal attacks, the regiment had endured 35% casualties within just under 2 days. Lieutenant Colonel William Duplantis, who led the 3rd Battalion of the 21st Marines, devised a strategy that would alter the course of the battle. He requested the deployment of flamethrower tanks. At precisely 14:20 hours, the first M4A3R3 flamethrower tank was sent into action, tank number 431. Under the command of Staff Sergeant Robert Meza, a seasoned veteran from Saipan and Tinian, advanced towards Japanese positions at an oblique angle, taking cover behind wrecked enemy aircraft. Observers on the Japanese side mistook it for yet another conventional Sherman tank attempting a futile assault. Meza recognized that any element of surprise would be their sole advantage. Inside the tank, the 5-man crew prepared for combat. The driver, Private First Class James Morrison, navigated the vehicle through the volcanic ash to prevent it from getting stuck in the 35-ton machine, The assistant driver, Private Robert Chen, manned the bow machine gun and kept an eye out for approaching Japanese infantry. Corporal Anthony Vitelli checked the fuel pressure gauges. At 300 psi, everything was set for optimal range. Corporal Thomas Carlson used his periscope to track the nearest pillbox. When they were approximately 125 yards away from it, Meza gave the order, "Gunner, fire!" The CBH-1 flamethrower discharged with a sound likened to the devil's own blowtorch, releasing a stream of napalm and thickened fuel oil propelled by compressed nitrogen. The incendiary liquid hit the pillbox's opening with deadly precision, spilling into the machine gun port and pouring inside like molten lava. The results were immediate and terrifying. In mere seconds, the interior temperature of the concrete fortification skyrocketed past 2000 Z Fahrenheit. Oxygen levels plummeted so swiftly that Japanese soldiers suffocated before the flames could reach them. Those who survived the initial explosion tried to escape via rear exits, but were cut down by Marine riflemen positioned strategically for just such an eventuality. Sergeant Meza then rotated his turret 30 degrees and targeted a second pillbox. This time, however, the defenders were prepared. A Japanese 47M anti-tank gun fired at point-blank range, its shell hitting the Sherman's frontal armor and bouncing off into the sky. Despite being jolted by the impact, the tank kept moving forward. Carlson initiated another burst, maintaining fire for 15 seconds until black smoke began pouring from every opening of the fortification. The third pillbox presented a new challenge due to its location behind a rocky outcropping which prevented direct engagement. Meza instructed Morrison to move within 80 yards of Japanese infantry positions, dangerously close territory. As the tank ascended a small rise, Japanese soldiers emerged from spider holes, rushing forward with satchel charges and magnetic mines. The tank's bow gunner opened fire with his .30 caliber machine gun, but several Japanese soldiers managed to reach the vehicle's blind spot. This was where the CBH-1 modifications proved invaluable. Unlike standard flamethrower tanks limited to firing forward, the CBH-1 could rotate its turret 180 degrees and fire directly behind the tank. The attacking infantry were engulfed by a wall of flames that witnesses described as resembling the gates of hell opening. With the third pillbox neutralized, Marines from the 21st Regiment advanced 400 yards in 2 hours. A significant distance compared to their progress over the previous 2 days. News spread quickly throughout the Marine communication network. The flamethrower tanks proved effective and resilient in scenarios where traditional tanks faltered. Within 6 hours, all 8 of these specialized tanks were operational across the battlefield. The tactical shift was both rapid and significant. Tank Fortin 34, which provided support for the 23rd Marines near Eastport Basin, obliterated 4 fortified positions within a single afternoon. Its crew devised a tactic known as corkscrew and burn, where they approached in a spiral pattern to avoid anti-tank fire while continuously spraying flame. This technique not only physically destroyed enemy defenses, but also had a profound psychological impact. Japanese troops trained to die at their posts started retreating upon seeing the flame tanks advance, leaving behind fortified positions rather than facing incineration. Tank 437 worked alongside the 24th Marines and introduced a new tactic called breach and clear. Initially, the flamethrower would neutralize enemy defenders. Subsequently, Marine engineers would swiftly move in with explosives to dismantle the fortifications permanently. This combined approach was highly effective against entrenched positions that had previously resisted conventional attacks for days. In just one afternoon, a single flame tank and an engineer team destroyed 7 bunkers that had halted an entire battalion's advance. However, it was Tank 432 that demonstrated the psychological power of these weapons most dramatically. Supporting the 26 Marines near Mount Shuribaki's base, Tank 432 approached a network of interconnected caves. Sergeant William Patterson, commanding officer, instructed his driver to halt at a distance of 100 yards from the cave entrances. Through the tank's periscope, Patterson observed Japanese soldiers watching from within the darkness. He then fired a brief burst of flame into the air as a warning demonstration. The psychological effect was instantaneous and unprecedented. Japanese troops began fleeing through rear exits, abandoning positions they had been ordered to defend to the death. The Marine riflemen were so stunned that they initially failed to open fire on the retreating enemy forces. Within 30 minutes, an entire defensive sector had crumbled without a single shot being fired by the tank directly at the adversary. This marked the first instance of widespread desertion from defensive positions in Japanese military history. By February 20th evening, Marine units were already adjusting their tactics to incorporate the use of flamethrower tanks. Attack plans were delayed until these flame-armed vehicles could be deployed. Infantry squads learned to stay approximately 50 yards behind the tanks, allowing them to take advantage of the psychological impact while avoiding the intense heat that could char hair at a distance of just 30 yards. Artillery observers started targeting enemy positions specifically for flamethrower engagement rather than relying solely on conventional bombardment. The initial day's combat statistics were impressive. 47 fortified positions had been obliterated. Marine casualties in supported sectors decreased by 40% compared to the previous day, and 600 yards of previously static territory was reclaimed within just 2 days. The most significant statistic, however, pertained to morale. For the first time, substantial numbers of Japanese soldiers were abandoning their posts rather than facing certain death. The Japanese response came swiftly but proved largely ineffective. That night, General Kuribayashi issued emergency orders designating the flame tanks as top priority targets. All available 47mm anti-tank guns were ordered to focus fire on these vehicles, and special assault teams were formed with volunteers who would attack using explosive charges strapped to their bodies. Infantry units were instructed to target the vision blocks of the flame tanks with concentrated rifle fire in an attempt to blind the crews. Despite these efforts, the core issue remained unsolvable. The flame tanks looked identical to regular Shermans until they fired. This made it impossible for Japanese gunners to identify priority targets in time. Additionally, focusing on the flame tanks meant neglecting conventional tanks that provided cover fire. On February 23rd, D+4, the same day that Marines hoisted the flag atop Mount Surabaki, American forces deployed innovative mechanical advancements to achieve tactical surprise. The 3rd Marine Division attempted to seize Hill 382, the second highest point on Iwo Jima and a crucial part of Kuribayashi's northern defenses. This hill was riddled with bunkers and tunnels extending up to 7 stories below ground level. Japanese forces had pre-registered every approach with artillery and mortars, making it nearly impregnable. The positions designed by Japanese engineers included multiple defensive lines, interlocking fields of fire, and underground passages that allowed defenders to reappear behind advancing attackers. Previous attacks resulted in casualty rates exceeding 50%, with the 1st Battalion of the 9th Marines suffering a loss of 70% when trying to capture just the approaches to the hill. At 8:00 a.m., 4 flamethrower tanks advanced in an echelon formation, backed by 6 conventional Shermans and a battalion of Marine infantry. However, this time the Japanese were prepared. Concealed 75mm mountain guns, larger than the standard 47mm anti-tank weapons, had been positioned specifically to target flame tanks. When the leading flamethrower tank reached the crest of the first rise, concentrated fire from 3 hidden positions erupted simultaneously. The initial round hit Tank 433's track, immobilizing it. Despite being stationary, its crew continued firing the flamethrower, creating a wall of flames that obscured following vehicles and suppressed Japanese positions. This act of self-sacrifice enabled other tanks to maneuver through the smoke. Private First Class Morrison, driving Tank 431, later recounted navigating by periscope through dense smoke where visibility was no more than 10 feet ahead. At 60 yards from the main Japanese bunker complex, Tank 434's flamethrower discharged its payload, but this time the Japanese had adapted to the threat. Engineers had positioned steel plates over the bunker apertures, which could be sealed between bursts of machine gun fire. The flames merely sizzled off the impervious metal surface. It appeared that the Japanese had discovered a way to neutralize the threat posed by flame tanks. Corporal Michael Rodriguez, a skilled gunner, noticed something crucial. After prolonged exposure to the flamethrowers' incendiary mixture, the steel plates turned cherry red, a temperature at which they would inevitably warp and develop gaps. Despite this risk, Rodriguez continued firing for 45 seconds, far surpassing standard procedure and dangerously depleting his fuel supply. Eventually, the metal gave way, allowing the flammable liquid to pour inside, setting the interior ablaze. Ammunition ignited in a chain of explosions, while concrete walls cracked under the extreme heat. The thermal shock even exposed previously hidden tunnel entrances crafted by Japanese engineers. Marines swiftly advanced with satchel charges and explosives, targeting every possible entry point before the enemy could regroup. Within 3 hours, Hill 382's formidable outer defenses had crumbled. Though the position seemed impregnable, it was now falling. However, the battle highlighted significant limitations of flame tank technology. For example, tank number 431 exhausted its fuel after only 80 seconds of continuous use. Replenishing the tanks required them to withdraw to designated refueling zones where specialized trucks waited, a process that took a minimum of 2 hours. This interval allowed Japanese forces ample time to regroup and reinforce their positions. While powerful, flame tanks were not invincible due to their limited fuel capacity. On this particular day, Corporal Herschel Woody Williams showcased the continued importance of man-portable flamethrowers. When flame-throwing tanks were unable to navigate a narrow ravine known as the amphitheater, Williams advanced on foot with an M22 flamethrower weighing 70 pounds. Over the course of 4 hours in combat, he was protected by only 4 riflemen, 2 of whom lost their lives defending him. During this time, Williams destroyed 7 pillboxes that were inaccessible to tanks. His technique complemented the efforts of flame-throwing tanks perfectly. Where tanks could not reach, courageous soldiers armed with portable flamethrowers could still advance. For his actions that day, he was awarded the Medal of Honor and became the last living World War II recipient of this prestigious award before passing away in June 2022 at the age of 98. His citation partially read, "Quick to volunteer when our tanks struggled to create a passage for infantry through reinforced concrete pillboxes, buried mines, and black volcanic sands. Corporal Williams bravely went forward alone despite intense machine gun fire from entrenched positions." The first week's combat statistics were telling. In sectors where flame-throwing tanks operated, Marine casualties decreased by 40% compared to unsupported attacks. Positions that had withstood days of conventional assault fell within hours when these tanks were employed. Over 7 days, the 8 tanks used an estimated 70,000 gallons of fuel mixture, destroying around 300 fortified positions. On average, they consumed about 10,000 gallons daily, creating a logistical challenge that necessitated special fuel depots near the front lines. By early March, fighting shifted to Ojima's northern plateau, an area characterized by sulfur pits, twisted ravines, and volcanic rock formations where tanks could hardly operate. General Kuribayashi had strategically placed his final defensive line here due to its terrain advantages for defenders. Marines faced 50 casualties in a single hill assault nicknamed the Meat Grinder. Tanks that attempted movement through sharp volcanic rocks often got stuck or immobilized by hidden obstacles beneath the ash. In response, flamethrower tanks adapted once more. Unable to maneuver freely, they transformed into mobile pillboxes positioned at strategic points to support infantry advances. Throughout the night, members of the 5th Engineer Battalion worked tirelessly to build ramps and clear paths while enduring sniper fire, enabling flame tanks to reach areas previously deemed unreachable. When direct attacks were impractical, these tanks employed indirect firing techniques by bouncing their flames off rocks to hit targets around corners or in dug-in positions. On March 8th, Depot 17, tank number 436 managed what the crew dubbed an impossible shot. As part of a supporting effort for the 9th Marine's assault on Cushman's Pocket, a complex network of caves and bunkers carved into near vertical cliffs. Sergeant Daniel Foster, The tank commander figured that firing at maximum elevation might allow flames to arc over the cliff edge and land inside Japanese positions. The angle required was 40 degrees, but the CBH flamethrower could only elevate up to 35 degrees. To achieve this, Foster instructed his driver to position the vehicle on rubble left by naval shelling, tilting it backward at a precarious angle. With mortar rounds falling around them, Corporal Anthony Vitelli, the gunner, activated the flamethrower. The molten napalm soared into the air, appeared to hover momentarily at its peak, and then fell into the Japanese positions below. This tactic was both physically destructive and psychologically devastating. Until that moment, Japanese soldiers had assumed their elevated defenses were safe from flame attacks. This belief crumbled in the ensuing inferno. Eyewitnesses described Japanese troops jumping off cliffs rather than face burning alive, opting for death by falling over death by fire. By mid-March, flamethrower tanks had become integral to a coordinated combined arms strategy. Each tank operated with its own dedicated support team, including conventional tanks to suppress enemy anti-tank guns, infantry for close protection against suicide attacks, engineers for obstacle clearance, and ammunition carriers bringing 300-gallon fuel trailers to extend operational time. This integration marked a revolution in assault tactics that would influence Marine Corps doctrine for decades. Maintaining the tank's operational capacity demanded an extensive supply chain reaching back to Pearl Harbor. Electrician mate second class Kissel, one of the original designers who accompanied the tanks to Iwo Jima to oversee maintenance, later noted that sustaining 8 flame tanks required immense logistical effort. Fuel mixing facilities operated around the clock, blending diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm powder according to exact proportions. The mixture needed to be utilized within 3 days, or it could separate and clog the flame guns. Meanwhile, the Japanese response continued to adapt. Special squads were created for tank destruction, consisting of volunteers who strapped explosive charges to their bodies and launched suicidal attacks. These human bombers managed some successes, like when a soldier detonated himself against Tank 438 on March 11th, killing 3 out of 5 crew members inside. However, such tactics proved ineffective in the long run. For each flame tank that was damaged, replacements arrived from the beach, and many were repaired and returned to action. General Kuribayashi, observing from his command bunker under the northern plateau, recognized the strategic significance. In his final report sent to Imperial headquarters on March 17th, he noted, "The enemy's special flame tanks have been more effective than all their artillery and air strikes combined. They achieve in minutes what conventional weapons cannot accomplish in days. We lack an effective countermeasure against this weapon. The Americans not only have superior numbers but also possess greater tactical ingenuity." The climax occurred during the last week of March when Marines advanced into the gorge, Kuribayashi's final defensive position. This labyrinthine terrain, known as a bloody gorge by the Marines, was a severe test of American tactical creativity against Japanese resolve to defend their positions. In an area less than 700 yards square, the remaining 3,000 Japanese defenders prepared for their last stand. On March 21st, D+30 all-functioning flamethrower tanks, 6 out of the original 8 with 2 under repair, were mobilized for a coordinated assault. They had been bolstered by 4 additional flame tanks dispatched from Hawaii. Although these newer models used the less effective Ronson system and had a range of only 60 to 80 yards, it would be the largest concentration of flame weapons seen in the Pacific War. Tank number 431, which had been repaired after being immobilized on Hill 382, spearheaded the assault. Its armor was marked by numerous combat scars, including welded patches where shell fragments had penetrated and dents from many hits that failed to breach its defenses. Number 433, equipped with a temporary track repair that emitted a distinctive clanking sound, took up position on the left flank. Tanks numbered 400 T4436 and 437 formed the central group, while tank number 432 anchored the right side of the formation. The attack commenced at 10:300 am with the tanks advancing in a crescent shape, ensuring overlapping fields of fire that left no blind spots for Japanese defenders to exploit. Marine infantry followed closely behind, lobbing white phosphorus grenades into cave openings to mark targets for the flame-throwing tanks. Engineers armed with demolition charges then sealed off positions after the flamethrowers had cleared them out. Japanese resistance was fierce but ultimately futile. Suicide squads emerged from concealed spider holes only to be incinerated before reaching their intended targets. Anti-tank guns fired point blank, and their crews continued to fire until flames engulfed their positions. In a particularly notable incident, a Japanese officer appeared from a bunker brandishing a samurai sword and charged directly at tank number 434. The tank's bow gunner hesitated, possibly out of shock or respect, allowing Marine riflemen to intervene and kill the officer just yards away from the vehicle. His sword was later sent to Marine Corps headquarters as an emblem of the enemy's desperate bravery. By sunset on March 21st, the gorge had been successfully breached. Over 800 Japanese defenders were dead, many beyond recognition due to severe burns. The flamethrower tanks used a staggering 8,000 gallons of fuel mixture in a single day, setting a new record for the campaign. Marine casualties amounted to 92 killed and 257 wounded, still significant but far fewer than what would have been incurred by conventional assault tactics. However, the cost of victory was evident on both sides. Tank crews reported experiencing severe psychological trauma from their role in the carnage. Corporal Coulson of Tank No. 431 later testified to this effect. The screams of those engulfed in flames could be heard on occasion during the night, though not for long. Even now, I can still hear it echoing in my mind. We did what was necessary, yet the stench of burning flesh combined with sulfur from the volcanic rock remains etched in my memory forever. Maintenance crews encountered charred human remains fused to tank tracks, necessitating blowtorches for removal. The tanks were deteriorating due to the relentless strain of combat. Communication failures occurred frequently because of the harsh conditions imposed by volcanic ash. Fuel lines became clogged with carbon deposits from a mixture that included napalm. Track pins snapped under the added weight of armor plates welded on for extra protection. By late March, maintaining just 4 operational tanks required scavenging parts from damaged vehicles. On March 26, 1945, Iwo was declared secure after 36 days of fighting, which far exceeded the initial projection of 5 days. American casualties amounted 26,038 with 6,821 fatalities. These figures stunned both the general public and military leadership in the United States. Japanese losses were nearly complete, as only around 216 defenders survived out of an estimated 21,000 troops, most captured or committing suicide to avoid capture or death by flame. The flamethrower tanks significantly altered the course of battle dynamics and are credited with potentially reducing American casualties by about 5,000 men according to post-action analysis. Over 1,000 fortified positions were obliterated, and nearly 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture were consumed, significantly altering Marine Corps assault tactics. However, perhaps most crucially, the myth of Japanese invincibility in defensive fortifications was shattered. Captain Frank Caldwell, commanding Company F of the 26th Marines, offered a concise summary. It was the flame tank that played the decisive role in this battle. Artillery, naval gunfire, and air strikes were unable to dislodge the Japanese from their underground bunkers, but the flamethrower tanks managed what other weapons could not. Statistical data underscored the impact of these flame weapons. Over 30% of casualties inflicted on Iwo Jima involved flame devices, both tank-mounted and portable. In areas where flame tanks were deployed, the rate of advance was 3 times higher than in unsupported attacks. The number of Japanese prisoners taken, 26 inks, exceeded the combined total from Tarawa, Seppan, and Peleliu. Many captives cited fear of being burned alive as their reason for surrendering. The tactical significance extended well beyond Iwo Jima. Following this success, the Marine Corps urgently requested an additional 54 flame tanks for future operations. Colonel Lum's team at Schofield Barracks responded by increasing production efforts to meet a top priority classification on par with that of the B-29 bomber and the Manhattan Project. This allowed them to develop the improved CBH-2 model, featuring enhanced range and reliability. By June 1945, 70 new flame tanks were ready for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. Observing the Marine success at Iwo Jima, the Army expedited its own flamethrower tank program. The entire 713th Tank Battalion was converted to flame tanks for the Okinawa campaign. During the Battle of Okinawa from April to June 1945, these Army flame tanks consumed another 200,000 gallons of fuel mixture and were equally effective against Japanese cave fortifications in southern parts of the island. Initially conceived as an emergency solution, the flamethrower tank became standard equipment for Pacific operations. However, the strategic ramifications went far beyond tactical maneuvers on the battlefield. Centuries of Japanese military doctrine crumbled in the face of American technological advancements. The flamethrower tanks were more than just a new weapon. They symbolized the shift from individual bravery to industrial might. Production figures speak volumes. Kono Ammar's flame tank unit produced 354 units by war's end, while the CBS at Schofield Barracks manufactured 236 343 gallons of flamethrower fuel. The napalm mixing facility they established could produce 1,000 gallons daily. This industrial capacity across the Pacific allowed American forces to systematically breach Japanese defenses with incendiary power. Despite their critical contributions, the creators of these weapons received little public acknowledgement. Machinist mate Raicher and electrician's mate Kissel returned to civilian life post-war, their names remembered only in rare technical documents. Colonel Unmarked continued his work on chemical warfare until retirement, a fact known to just a few military historians. Nevertheless, their innovations saved thousands of American lives and hastened the end of one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific theater. The tank crews encountered unique challenges. Many grappled with what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, haunted by images of human beings turned to ashes and screams extinguished by flames. Sergeant Meza remained silent about his service until shortly before his death in 1993, when he confided in his grandson, "We did what had to be done. No one should take pride in burning people alive, but those tanks saved countless Marine lives." That's the memory I try to hold on to. After the war, veterans of the flame tank units formed a private support network. Each year, they convened in Hawaii and returned to Schofield Barracks, where their weapons were forged. These gatherings, which remained outside of public scrutiny, offered the men a space to exchange stories too harrowing for civilians to grasp. The most recent assembly took place in 2010 and was attended by just 4 remaining crew members. Japanese insights began surfacing gradually through interrogations and seized documents. Soldiers indoctrinated with the belief that dying in combat ensured spiritual elevation found themselves gripped by terror at the prospect of being incinerated. The shame of deserting combat posts seemed less daunting than meeting their end inside underground ovens. This psychological breakdown led to unprecedented large-scale surrenders within Japanese military history. Lieutenant Yamada, who witnessed the initial flamethrower tank assault on February 20th, survived the battle and was among the T-16 prisoners taken captive. In his post-war testimony to American intelligence officers, he remarked, "We had anticipated every manner of death. Bullets, shells, bayonets, starvation. But we were unprepared for the burning petroleum that infiltrated our deepest bunkers. The flame tanks shattered our morale in ways conventional weapons could not. They transformed our greatest asset, our underground defenses, into our graves." Former Sergeant Masao Hayashi, captured after being burned alive while attempting to flee from a bunker, provided vivid testimony. The napalm descended like a tidal wave, filling every crevice. Soldiers attempted escape through emergency exits, but encountered more flames awaiting them there. Some chose suicide rather than burn alive, while others surrendered to American gunfire, preferring bullets over incineration. I saw seasoned warriors decline entering battle positions after witnessing approaching flame tanks. This was not the death we had trained for. The impact of flamethrower tanks continued into the post-war era, marking a significant shift in military psychology and strategy. The success achieved during the Battle at Iwo Jima prompted the United States Marine Corps to fundamentally overhaul its assault strategies by emphasizing combined arms tactics that included armor, infantry, and engineering units. Specialized armor designed for specific battlefield challenges became a cornerstone of military strategy. Future advancements would focus on adaptability and innovation rather than sheer firepower. Technology continued to evolve, with M4A3R3 Sherman flamethrower tanks seeing action in Korea during the battles for the Punch Bowl and Heartbreak Ridge. These flame tanks destroyed over 300 Chinese fortifications but had less dramatic results due to increased Chinese awareness of their capabilities. The final American flame tank, the M132, based on an M113 armored personnel carrier, was decommissioned in 1978, marking the end of a lineage that began with 8 hastily modified Shermans stored in a secret warehouse in Hawaii. By this time, thermobaric weapons and precision-guided munitions had taken over as primary tools for assaulting fortified positions. International regulations eventually limited flamethrower use through Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, which restricts incendiary weapon deployment. Public opinion shifted against such weaponry due to perceptions of excessive cruelty. Nonetheless, military historians highlight an ironic twist. Despite the horror associated with flame tanks, they shortened battles and potentially saved thousands of lives that conventional assaults might have claimed. The industrial accomplishment is significant. The United States produced 49 234 Sherman tanks during World War II, but only 354 were converted into flamethrower configurations. Despite their relatively small number, these vehicles had a disproportionately large impact. In Iwo Jima, 8 flame tanks altered the course of a potentially protracted and costly battle. At an estimated conversion cost of 200,000 per tank in 1945, this investment seems modest compared to lives saved. Military analysts estimate that each flame tank at Iwo Jima may have prevented up to 625 American casualties based on casualty rates from unsupported versus flame-supported attacks. In the grim calculations of warfare, the technological investment yielded substantial benefits measured in lives spared. However, the most significant legacy was psychological. The flamethrower tanks proved that technological advancements could triumph over even the most resolute human opposition. This marked the end of an era dominated by individual warrior skill and ushered in a new age where victory would belong to nations with superior industrial production and technical ingenuity. Despite the nobility of the samurai spirit, it was no match for liquid fire dispensed from mass-produced machines. In the volcanic terrain of Iwo Jima, among memorials dedicated to valor and sacrifice, rest the remains of more than 20,000 Japanese soldiers who perished defending what they considered impregnable positions. Many were burned alive by weapons they could not have anticipated. Their death signaled not only the conclusion of a battle, but also the end of an era when spiritual dedication could conquer material disadvantages. The 8 M4A3R3 flamethrower tanks that saw action at Iwo Jima were essentially machines, constructed from steel, aluminum, rubber, and mechanical parts by workers who would never engage in combat. Yet, these vehicles symbolized something far greater: the mobilization of American industrial capacity, scientific innovation, and mechanical expertise for the purpose of securing victory. The CBS engineers who manufactured them, the Marines who operated them, and the Japanese soldiers who faced them were all part of a transformation that would shape modern warfare. Today, one of these last surviving flamethrower tanks from Iwo Jima is on display at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. Tank number 434, now a museum piece, bears visible signs of its servicer, welding marks where armor was repaired, dents caused by shell impacts, and scratches from volcanic rock. A small plaque provides details about its specifications and battle history. However, it cannot convey the sound of nitrogen being released, the smell of burning napalm mixed with sulfur, or the sight of liquid fire cascading into underground fortresses like water. Visitors often move quickly past the exhibit, disturbed by the weapon's horrific purpose. Schoolchildren on field trips frequently ask why such a terrible device was ever created. Veterans who understand its history tend to linger longer, some salute in respect, while others stand silently in remembrance. For them, this tank does not celebrate war, but acknowledges its grim necessities. In 2015, during the 70th anniversary of the battle, the final reunion for Iwo Jima flame tank veterans was held. Just 3 surviving crew members, all in their 90s, attended this gathering at the museum. Historians were present to capture and preserve these first-hand accounts. Among those who shared memories was Corporal Anthony Vitelli, formerly a gunner on Tank 436. When asked if he felt proud of his actions, he responded thoughtfully, "Pride is not an accurate term for what we did. It was a terrible yet necessary job. These tanks were instrumental in saving marine lives, and that's the true measure of their worth." The individuals responsible for designing, manufacturing, and operating these flame tanks have largely faded from the historical record. The last living Medal of Honor recipient associated with Iwo Jima, Corporal Herschel Woody Williams, passed away in June 2022 at age 98 after serving alongside the flame tanks during his military career. His legacy is carried forward through his foundation's efforts to honor Gold Star families and ensure that the sacrifices made by those who died are never forgotten. Colonel Unmarked classified reports, declassified in the 1970s, shed light on the rapid pace of innovation behind the development of flame tanks. The CBS worked tirelessly around the clock, sleeping beside their welding equipment to meet urgent demands, achieving what conventional military procurement would have taken years to accomplish. Their success was evident as these machines played a crucial role in bringing one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War to an accelerated conclusion. The Japanese military archives, open to researchers in the 1980s, provide insights into how the enemy viewed these flame tanks. Numerous reports detail the paralyzing effect of witnessing liquid fire advancing towards them, rendering concrete and steel fortifications useless against such a threat. Orders to hold positions at all costs became irrelevant when death came in the form of flowing fire that could bypass any obstacle. One report succinctly summarized this impact. The flame tanks rendered every defensive advantage meaningless. Height offered no protection from arsing flames. When flames surged like liquid into our tunnels, depth offered no protection. Concrete and steel barriers designed to resist tons of explosives were rendered useless by this fiery assault. In his final message, transmitted shortly before his death late in March 1945, General Kuribayashi made a prophetic observation. He noted that the Americans did not merely outmatch us with superior numbers or firepower, they overwhelmed us through ingenuity, transforming our impregnable underground fortifications into lethal traps. His prediction held true as military affairs evolved from the introduction of 8 flame tanks at Iwo Jima to guided missiles, precision weaponry, and cyber warfare. The core principle remained unchanged: technological innovation triumphs over conventional tactics. The shift from traditional combat methods to those involving flame warfare took only days but forever altered battle doctrine. Marines initially trained for conventional assaults quickly adapted their strategies by coordinating with flame tanks, leveraging the psychological shock effect to dismantle seemingly impenetrable defensive lines. This adaptation occurred not through formal training programs, but through rapid battlefield innovation driven by necessity. Post-war statistical analysis highlighted significant patterns in areas where flame tanks were deployed. Japanese defenders were 70% more likely to abandon their positions even before being overrun. The psychological impact of these vehicles far outweighed any physical destruction they inflicted. Often, the mere presence of flame tanks caused defensive lines to crumble without a single shot fired. One Marine intelligence report stated, "The enemy's fear of flame tanks approaches panic." Prisoners confirmed that soldiers refuse orders to hold positions once flame tanks are sighted nearby. The 8 flamethrower tanks from Iwo Jima accomplished something extraordinary during 36 days of combat. They established a new form of warfare, saved countless American lives, and played a significant role in securing victory at one of World War II's most pivotal battles. Their impact continued to be felt in every subsequent conflict where U.S. forces encountered entrenched adversaries, including the Korean War, Vietnam, and Iraq. However, moral dilemmas persist. Surviving tank crew members often grappled with their actions. The effectiveness of killing by fire and the industrial-scale incineration challenged traditional notions of honorable warfare. These soldiers had become tools of a harsh necessity, employing weapons that could reduce human beings to ashes in mere seconds. Many kept silent about their service, taking their traumatic memories to their graves rather than burdening others with the horror. A poignant testament emerged from a 1985 reconciliation ceremony on Oima. Former tank commander Robert Meza and former Lieutenant Koshi Yamada, who had witnessed the first flame tank attack, met at the site where Tank 431 had fired for the first time 4 decades earlier. Through an interpreter, Yamada expressed his thoughts. "I hated you for 7 years. The flame tanks killed my friends in ways I cannot forget. But now I understand. War turns us all into monsters. You did what was necessary, just as we did." Meza responded with simple words, "We were all just young men trying to survive." It's a relief that both of us lived to stand here today. The two veterans embraced as the sun set over Iwima's dark sandy beaches, walking together toward the memorial honoring those who had lost their lives. Against the darkening sky, Mount Kuribayashi loomed behind them. The once battle-scarred island had reverted to a state of tranquility. The era of the flamethrower tank in the Pacific began and concluded with its impact etched in flames across volcanic terrain. 8 adapted Shermans altered the course of warfare, illustrating that triumph in contemporary conflicts rested with nations adept at merging industrial power with battlefield ingenuity. Although the fires had long subsided, their influence on military history endured vividly. Ultimately, the Battle of Iwo Jima was secured not merely by bravery but through the union of American industrial capacity and tactical innovation, despite the abundant courage displayed by both sides. The flamethrower tanks embodied a confluence of technology, strategy, and resolve that would characterize American military dominance for decades to come. These weapons were products of their time, deemed necessary in a war requiring total victory. Japanese defenders had fought with unmatched valor, adhering strictly to orders to fight to the death. They constructed an impregnable underground fortress that conventional arms could not breach. However, they failed to account for incendiary devices that descended like liquid fire, targeting every cave and bunker, transforming their subterranean sanctuary into a crematorium. Their defeat was not due to a lack of courage, but rather a clash with superior technology and innovation. The statistics reveal the decisive outcome starkly: 8 flamethrower tanks, 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture, over 1,000 fortified positions obliterated, an estimated 5,000 American casualties averted, more than 6,000 Japanese soldiers perished by flame weapons, and 36 days of combat that might have extended indefinitely without flamethrowers. The calculus of modern warfare, where technological superiority translates directly into saved lives and won battles. Today, the volcanic island of Iwo Jima, now under Japanese control and renamed Iwuto, bears little visible trace of the fierce battle once fought there. Nature has reclaimed much of the battlefield, covering craters with vegetation and filling trenches with volcanic soil. Yet below the surface, sealed caves and collapsed tunnels still house the remains of soldiers who perished in the flames. Their sacrifice is remembered by fewer surviving witnesses each year. General Holland Smith, commander of the 5th Amphibious Corps at Iwo Jima, encapsulated this sentiment in his memoirs. "The flamethrower tanks were the difference between victory and disaster. Without them, our losses for every inch gained on that accursed island would have been staggering. They were terrifying weapons, yet war itself is a brutal enterprise. Ultimately, they likely saved more lives than any other weaponry we used. The infernos that engulfed Japanese defenses on Iwo Jima are now just memories. Most of the soldiers who wielded these tools have faded into history's annals. Yet the revolution they sparked, a shift from personal combat to technological supremacy, continues to influence military strategy globally. In 8 adapted Sherman tanks, America discovered a weapon capable of breaching the impregnable stronghold of Iwo Jima, thereby altering the course and nature of warfare permanently. The battle was won, the war's end was imminent. However, the echoes of those flames, the sound of nitrogen being released, the sight of liquid fire pouring into bunkers, the abrupt silencing of screams as they were consumed by heat, would reverberate through military annals forevermore. The era of the warrior met its fiery conclusion on a volcanic island in the Pacific. The age of technological warfare had dawned.